Some of the most chilling words ever spoken weren't from horror movies or scary books. They were real, spoken by real people in their final moments. Words so disturbing they still haunt investigators, families, and anyone who hears them decades later. Today, we're counting down the top 10 most disturbing final words ever recorded. Fair warning, some of these will stick with you long after this video ends. Let's start with number 10. Gary Gilmore, a convicted murderer facing execution in Utah, 1977. Most people's last words are apologies, prayers, or messages to loved ones. But when they asked Gilmore if he had any final words before his execution by firing squad, he looked straight at them and said, "Let's do it." Just 3 words. Cold, matter of fact, like he was ordering coffee. What makes this so disturbing isn't just the casualness, it's that Gilmore had actually fought to die. He fired his own lawyers who tried to appeal his death sentence. He wanted this. "Let's do it." Later inspired one of the most famous advertising slogans in history. Nike's "Just Do It" came partly from Dan Wieden, the ad executive who remembered Gilmore's final words. Of course, Nike meant it as motivation to exercise and chase your dreams. But it's chilling to think that millions of people around the world have been inspired by a slogan that has its roots in a killer's final moment before execution. Sometimes the darkest moments in history get repackaged into something completely different. Number 9 takes us to the Jonestown Massacre, 1978. Over 900 people died that day, most from poisoned drinks. But it's what their leader Jim Jones said in his final recorded message that still gives people chills. As chaos erupted around him and people were dying, Jones spoke into his recorder. "We didn't commit suicide. We committed an act of revolutionary suicide protesting the conditions of an inhumane world." Think about that for a second. He's watching hundreds of his followers die. Children, babies, entire families. And he's calling it revolutionary. Not tragic, not a mistake. Revolutionary. The most disturbing part is, you can hear children crying in the background of that recording. Jones knew exactly what was happening, and he still thought he was the hero of the story. It makes you wonder, how many other people convince themselves they're doing the right thing, even as everything falls apart around them? Number 8 brings us to Ted Bundy's execution in 1989. The serial killer who murdered at least 30 women had one last chance to speak before they flipped the switch. Most expected him to confess, apologize, or at least show some remorse. Instead, Bundy looked at his lawyer and said, "Give my love to my family and friends." Love. He talked about love. This is a man who spent years hunting, torturing, and killing innocent women, who manipulated everyone around him, who showed no real remorse for destroying so many lives, and his final word was love. The twisted thing is, Bundy probably meant it. In his warped mind, he genuinely loved his family. He could compartmentalize his monstrous acts while still feeling affection for people close to him. It's a reminder that evil doesn't always look like the monsters in movies. Sometimes it looks like someone who talks about love. Number 7 takes us to the Challenger space shuttle disaster, 1986. 7 astronauts died when the shuttle exploded just 73 seconds after launch. The final words from the crew weren't screams or panic. The last thing recorded from pilot Michael Smith was, "Uh-oh." Just, "Uh-oh," like he'd dropped his coffee mug. NASA analysis showed the crew cabin remained intact during the explosion. The astronauts were likely conscious during the 3-minute fall to the ocean. They knew they were going to die, but we'll never know what they said to each other in those final minutes. "Uh-oh" represents that split second when everything normal becomes a nightmare, when routine becomes disaster, when "uh-oh" becomes goodbye. Those 2 simple words capture the moment when 7 heroes realized they weren't coming home. Number 6 comes from the 9/11 attacks. Kevin Cosgrove was trapped on the 105th floor of the South Tower when he made his final phone call to 911. His last recorded words were, "Oh God, oh," and then the line went dead as the tower collapsed. What makes this so disturbing isn't just the words, it's everything you can hear in his voice. The disbelief, the realization, the moment when hope turned to terror. Cosgrove had been calmly giving the dispatcher information, trying to help rescuers find him. He was being brave, doing everything right, and then, in an instant, it was over. That recording has been played in court, in documentaries, in memorials. Every time it reminds us that behind every tragedy statistic is a real person who had no idea they were living their last moments. Number 5 takes us inside the mind of a killer. Karl Panzram was a serial killer and rapist who claimed to have murdered 21 people. When he was about to be executed in 1930, the executioner asked if he had any last words. Panzram's response, "Yes, hurry it up, you Hoosier bastard. I could kill 10 men while you're fooling around." Even facing death, he was still violent, still angry, still threatening to kill. Most people facing execution show some kind of emotion, fear, remorse, acceptance. But Panzram was cursing at his executioner and bragging about murder. He was exactly the same monster in his final seconds as he'd been his entire adult life. Number 4 brings us to the sinking of the Titanic, 1912. As the unsinkable ship went down, the ship's band famously kept playing music to keep passengers calm. The final song they played was reportedly "Nearer My God to Thee." But it's what bandleader Wallace Hartley supposedly said to his musicians that's truly haunting. "Gentlemen, it has been a privilege playing with you tonight. Think about that level of courage. The ship is sinking. People are screaming. Chaos everywhere. And these men decide to spend their final moments trying to bring peace to others. They knew they were going to die. The band members' bodies were later found still wearing their life jackets. But instead of fighting for the lifeboats, they chose to comfort strangers with music. Those words represent the best of humanity in our darkest hour. But they're disturbing because they remind us that heroes often die while cowards survive. Number 3 comes from the Columbine High School shooting, 1999. Teacher Dave Sanders was shot while helping students escape. As he lay dying, bleeding out in a classroom, he wrote his final words on a piece of paper. He didn't write about the pain. He didn't write about being scared. He wrote, "Tell my girls I love them." Oh man, can you imagine that? How heartbreaking it is. Sanders had 2 daughters, and as he felt his life slipping away, surrounded by terrified students trying to save him, all he could think about was making sure his girls knew he loved them. The students with him tried everything to keep him alive while they waited for help that came too late. They held his hand. They talked to him. They watched a hero die. Those words are disturbing because they show us what really matters in our final moments. Not our jobs, not our achievements, not our grudges. Just love. And they're haunting because Dave Sanders never got to say those words to his daughters himself. Number 2 takes us to one of history's most notorious figures. Adolf Hitler's final words were reportedly spoken to his bodyguard in his bunker as the Allies closed in on Berlin, 1945. Hitler's last recorded words, "Above all, I charge the leaders of the nation to scrupulous observance of the laws of race and to merciless opposition to the universal poisoner of all peoples, international jury." Even in his final moments, facing defeat and death, Hitler was still spreading hate, still blaming others, still trying to poison minds with his twisted ideology. What makes this so disturbing is that Hitler learned nothing. His empire was crumbling, millions were dead because of his choices, and instead of showing any remorse or taking responsibility, he used his final breath to spread more hatred. Some people go to their graves never understanding the evil they've caused. They die believing they were right, leaving their poison behind for others to clean up. And now, number 1. The most disturbing final words ever spoken come from someone you probably haven't heard of. In 1994, a man named Jeffrey Dahmer was beaten to death in prison by a fellow inmate. But it's not Dahmer's final words that top our list. It's what his killer, Christopher Scarver, said Dahmer told him earlier that day. According to Scarver, Dahmer had been taunting other inmates by shaping his food to look like severed limbs and using ketchup as fake blood. When Scarver confronted him, Dahmer reportedly said, "I bite." 2 words that sum up a monster. Even in prison, even knowing he was hated by everyone around him, Dahmer couldn't help but be the predator he'd always been. "I bite" weren't technically his final words. Those came during his beating. But they were his final threat, his final attempt to frighten someone, his final reminder that even caged, he still saw himself as dangerous. What makes these words so disturbing is that they show Dahmer never really changed. He died as he lived, a predator who found satisfaction in others' fear and disgust. These final words stay with us because they reveal truth. In those last moments, people often show us who they really were all along. Some reveal courage, love, and humanity. Others show us darkness that runs deeper than we want to believe. What do you think your final words will be? Let me know in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more stories that will keep you awake at night.